Good evening. My name is Janet H. Oswald, and my story is titled Identity. My dad was a first-generation American. He was born in 1910. His mother came from Germany, and I've had it in my head for a long time that his dad was Prussian, coming from that country before it ceased to exist. I have a number of heirlooms and memories about my father. Among them, a desk set, an executive desk set, with a place for a pencil and a pen and a notepad. It has a GE logo raised up on the top of it, and below a brass nameplate engraved R.H. Hubenthal. Now, my dad was a Midwesterner, born and raised in Des Moines, Iowa. And at 9, he took about paying jobs to help support the family. His parents, a younger brother. His dad had been crippled in an accident. He went on to graduate from Des Moines University. Quite an accomplishment, and he paid that tuition with his own money. So, moving on, I'll back up and say, that diploma he received had on it, distinguished degree in electrical engineering. Now, General Electric picked up on him having that degree, and he almost immediately got a job with General Electric Company. I think the years between 1937, 38, 39 must have been very, very exciting for him. He had a job, he married the woman who became my mother, and he moved east to Schenectady, to the offices in Schenectady, New York. Settling in Scotia, New York, he was able to buy a modest house and start a family. He surrounded himself with a cadre of friends, mostly through an affiliation with National Model Railroad Company, or Association. These people became lifelong friends. And on his engineer's hat was the badge, a name that they knew him by, Hubie Hubenthal. Well, as things happen, in 1949, General Electric transferred him. They transferred him to Syracuse, New York. And Dad moved his family, Mom and 4 daughters, off to a 400-acre farm near Syracuse, New York, where the new offices were. I was just an infant in 1949. I had just been born and was part of the last wave of the post-World War II baby boom, a baby boomer. Well, what was the farm all about? My sisters reminisced and said, Dad must have had a midlife crisis to stick us out on that farm. I kind of disagree, because here are these pictures where he's a young man, very young, a teenager perhaps, ice skating, and at a beach, on a lake, swimming, trees behind him. Dad loved the outdoors, and I would too. He had paid, according to the deed, $49,000 for that acreage and this huge, old, ancient farmhouse. Mother called it an investment. It's fine. For me, the farm was an absolute wonderland. It was kindergarten personified. Unrestrained childhood. I had fields of tall grass and the woods to explore. There was wildlife. We were a half-mile from the main road, a dirt lane to walk. And Dad built us a treehouse, and my sister included, over the stream that ran diagonally through the property. And we would go walk through the orchard when it was pungent with apples and buy eggs at the nearby egg farm. So I loved the farm. When the weather was particularly rainy, we had a muddy, muddy lane and deep snow. Dad would drive us out to the bus stop at the end of it on the tractor. Now, I don't remember much about school, but that much I do. And I think I was pretty good with it all. Well, there came up a word, a phrase, that Dad was a gentleman farmer. A gentleman farmer. As if he didn't really work the farm. But I know he did. He certainly did. And it was only because, a gentleman farmer, only because he still had a job with GE. We girls, though, had our farm chores. We, of course, raked leaves and shoveled snow. We watched after horses that were put in a pasture we rented out for them. We rounded up the 10 or so head of beef white-faced cattle when they got loose. And a most tasking job, we turned trefoil silage on large drying racks out in the sun. So we were pretty much a working farm. We had our playtime in the house as well as around the farm. Playtime in the house was mostly hide and seek. And that house was fantastic for hide and seek, except the attic was verboten. We weren't allowed. He kept it locked. Fine. Dad was not one to reprimand or punish. And he had one little action. He'd thump us on the head, usually quite hard. Use your noggin. And my sisters hated this. But I've come to think of it as, it was a vote of confidence. You got brains up there, girl. Use them and believe in yourself. So as companies will do, they transferred Dad back to Schenectady. This move was abrupt and totally jarring for me. I don't think I had even ever seen a housing development. But home now was in a brand new development house, set on the rise of a corner lot, houses all around us. Though our house, like most of them, were customized and it was individual. The walk now to the school bus stop was 3 or 4 house blocks on a paved street. And again, if it was rainy or the snow was particularly deep, Dad drove us, my sister and me, to the bus stop for the school bus. It wasn't on the tractor now, though. It was in his maroon Lincoln. And Dad would come home for lunch. I took a bagged lunch, and Dad did too, but when he came home during the summer for lunch, I would see him sitting there as I ate my lunch with him in a white shirt and a tie and a gray suit. On weekends, though, the work clothes broke out again. The work trousers, the plaid flannel shirt, and Dad would putter around our very small yard or out in the garage. When lunchtime came, he would come in and begin assembling his Reuben sandwich. Yes, toasted dark pumpernickel rye bread. Put on the spicy brown mustard. Heap on the spoonfuls of liverwurst that you scooped out of the casing and broil that. Then came the sauerkraut. Be sure you squeeze out the brine. And so on. He had a system. It was educational, so observe and learn. Well, I got through high school. I guess I used my smarts pretty well. And I found myself at an all-girls college, a small one, downstate. And I majored in art and interior design. Nothing was ever discussed about tuition. My spending money, however, Dad paid for the tuition, but my spending money came from a work scholarship. And this was no particular big deal because every student in the school had a job, and that was intern by rotation to help serve the evening meal, which we all sat down together at. It was served family style. So I just went through the rotation and served a bit more and got paid for it. That was fine. I'd had a job at the library too. I found myself sewing draperies and ironing fancy blouses for the other girls in the dorm. That was my spending money. Well, when I was a sophomore, college sophomore, the design group was to take a trip to New York City. We were to visit the design houses, the furniture and fabric stores that were exclusive to the trade. Only design tradespeople could visit them. As students, we got a little perk, I guess. And it was very, very exciting for me. My only experience in the city had been with my mother and my sisters. Dad would drive us into Syracuse on his way to work. We'd get out and go to particular department stores for the shoes and things we couldn't get in a small town. And after lunch, he would pick us up. Lunch was always at Edward's department store in the luncheonette. And we sat in a cushy Naugahyde booth, all red and shiny. We didn't sit at the stools at the counter, never, never, never. And I ordered milk and grilled cheese. That was lunch. Well, on to the second day, or on to what happened at the trip in New York. The first day, it was decided that we would go to the automat for lunch. So I beheld a wide wall of chrome-rimmed windows, doors that had heavy glass in them, all lit up behind. I read a selection from neatly printed labels and dropped in my money. The action began as these trays suspended, started going round and round. They went click, clack, and I thought, oh, Dad, the engineer, he'd really, really enjoy this. He'd appreciate the machinery of the. And when the selection stopped, and I went over and opened the door to take out my lunch, I took out a square, cold, white bread sandwich wrapped in cellophane. Something came over me. Something that took me to another time and place. And I could hear the gears. It was a conveyor belt taking 50, 80-pound bales of hay up and up and up to the hayloft of the barns at the farm. And it was green and gold, and there was the rich, sweet fragrance of alfalfa as these bales went up and up to the hayloft. And they were stacked nearly to the ceiling in the barn. Hay bales, bales of hay, alfalfa and sweet, that would feed the cows through the whole winter. The second day of the trip in New York City, back to that. Second day of the trip in New York City, we found ourselves with some free time, and it was our choice of where to go for lunch. So I just kind of followed along with the girls who kind of knew what the choices were. That seemed expedient to me. And I think if anybody were to have seen us, they would have said, oh, that's a properly chaperoned, fashionable group of young ladies here in the city for a shopping day. I wasn't so sure. I had a worry. I had a worry that one of them might ask me, where had I bought my ensemble? And I couldn't say. Couldn't say where. I couldn't reveal to them that I had actually made my own coat and matching skirt and had worn it to my interview and had it for 3 years now. It was like a dark secret. If I were to say I was actually fairly competent in hand tailoring of clothing. Well, we were to do some shopping before we went to lunch, and we went on down the street. I was astounded at the variety and the quantity and the flashiness of the things that were in these stores. Get a gift, get a souvenir, I was encouraged. And the girls were delighted with their packages and bundles and bags of things they had bought. I found myself kind of hugging the displays, the window displays, and just kind of looking at them while I clutched my purse and mentally counted my dollars. There were no souvenirs for me in these stores. We went along the street now to the restaurant, and pretty soon the girl who had appointed herself leader kind of trilled out, "Voila!" And we had arrived at the restaurant. It was old world style, and rather small, decorated with wooden beams and copper utensils on the wall. We were promptly seated at a large oval table, kind of back in the corner. I found myself kind of squished in among the girls, but I still had a good view. Out to the center of the restaurant was a large cooking station with gas jet burners. And that's where we would see our meal prepared right before our eyes, as promised. Well, rather handsome young man came in with a white shirt and a black jacket, and he greeted us with, "Bonjour, madame, mademoiselles." Bien, and I didn't quite hear, but La Crêperie. We had arrived at La Crêperie, the restaurant. Okay, I could handle this. As the giggle went up and all the other girls responded, bonjour. I'd had my first basic year of French, bonjour, but I'd also had 2 years of German then and some Spanish, so hola and guten Tag is all I could think. He handed out the menus, reading off specials in French and English, and I think he saw my mortified face. When he handed me mine, he added descriptions in English, dear. And so I started reading down the list, but I didn't pay too much attention to crepes and cheese, crepes and ham and asparagus, crepes and chicken, crepes. I didn't pay much attention except to that price, wondering if this would be a good value if I could afford it, my pocketbook feeling really pretty thin. And then my compadre in poverty next to me, I did have a few girlfriends. She slowly raised her hand and pointed to an item on the menu. I nodded in agreement, and she ordered for both of us in English. Done. I continued down the list, and well, here was an item I kind of recognized. Crepes Suzette. A feeling of familiarity kind of washed over me. Crepes Suzette. And in my head, I heard my mother's voice. Call it that if you want to, but... And then the girls were all chattering away, practicing their French and exclaiming about the restaurant and, oh, what an adventure this was going to be, such an exotic thing to do and have for lunch. But I started chuckling. I heard my mother's voice, yes, and thought about the times when the refrigerator had too many eggs and there was leftover ham or chicken or turkey. Or maybe we just wanted a sweet meal. And Dad would order off to Mom to fix us brunch. We were having brunch. I could relax. This was comfortable. Out at the center workstation, the chef started beating and chopping, and he was pouring and flipping and folding. And I really started to chuckle because I could see my mother's elbows bobbing away. I could see her dipping the ladle, and I could see her twirling the pan, her hands and wrists twisting around. Dad had ordered brunch, and her voice was saying to me, call it crepes if you want to. Call it that if you want to. But it's just pannekuchen. It's just German pancakes? German pancakes. And it was home to me. Among those little heirlooms is a picture of Dad and his parents, neatly written in fountain pen ink. Is the name I will always know him by, Reinhard Heinrich Hubenthal. And I've come to know a bit more about myself, too. Thank you.